Police have confirmed that there was no foul play involved in Hulk Hogan's death.
And transported Mr. Balea to Morton Plant Hospital, where he died at 11:17 a.m. There are no signs of foul play or suspicious activity related to this call for service at this time.
But his daughter has leaked documents that suggest a possible cover-up, making it seem like someone may have wanted him dead.
I had a target on my back the whole time.
At the center of everything is a shocking $50 million lawsuit that could change everything we thought we knew. And the story only gets darker from there. Wrestling fans across the world were left stunned when the heartbreaking news broke on July 24th, 2025, that the legendary Hulk Hogan had passed away. But as the wrestling community mourned the loss of its greatest icon, troubling details started to surface about the final years of his life. These details paint a disturbing picture of medical neglect, corporate greed, and a healthcare system that may have failed wrestling's biggest star at the time he needed it the most. The official cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest at his home in Clearwater, Florida. But those close to Hogan knew his passing was the result of years of painful medical struggles that had left his once powerful body broken and betrayed. The man who once stood 6 feet 7 inches tall had been reduced to about 6 feet 4 inches due to repeated surgeries and spinal compression. His golden tan had faded, his legendary 24-inch arms had withered, and the superhuman strength that made him wrestling's greatest champion had been stripped away by a series of medical procedures that, according to explosive legal documents, should never have been performed in the first place.
How much pain are you in right now?
Everything hurts it's hard to explain. Like if I'm going to brush my teeth and I'm leaning on the counter brushing my teeth, I can't push away.
The pain in Hogan's voice during his final interviews was impossible to miss, as this was a man who had endured decades of punishment inside the wrestling ring, who had taken chair shots and falls that would have sent ordinary men to the hospital, now admitting that he struggled with even the simplest daily tasks. This was no longer the invincible Hulkster that fans remembered, but a broken warrior whose body had turned into a battlefield of surgical scars and failed medical treatments. Over the last decade of his life, Hogan went through an incredible 25 surgeries, including 10 procedures done specifically on his back.
Also pain management.
Yeah, that's a whole nother trip, brother, because I've had 25 surgeries in the last 10 years. So when people say, hey, the wrestling's fake, it goes right up my ass. Because at the end of the day, it's predetermined. If you and I are wrestling, they're going to tell us who's going to win or lose. But all that stuff that happens in the middle, it hurts.
These were not routine maintenance procedures, but desperate attempts to repair damage that, according to medical experts and legal documents that later surfaced, had been made far worse by a series of failed surgeries carried out by doctors who allegedly put profit above patient care. The wrestling legend, who once seemed untouchable, was being broken down piece by piece, one surgery at a time, by the very medical professionals who had sworn an oath to do no harm. The most damaging evidence of this medical malpractice came to light in January 2013, when Hogan filed a massive $50 million lawsuit against the Laser Spine Institute. And the claims inside that lawsuit read like a horror story of negligence and corporate greed. According to the legal filings, between February 2009 and August 2010, Hogan went through 6 unnecessary endoscopic procedures for conditions such as scoliosis, spondylolisthesis, and spinal stenosis. But here's where the story takes a darker turn, because these procedures were not only ineffective, but left him in even worse shape. These surgeries were allegedly carried out, even though the doctors knew they would not work, and the lawsuit exposes a shocking pattern of lies and manipulation that would make even the most dramatic wrestling storylines seem small in comparison. The Institute was accused of using scare tactics to push Hogan away from a traditional spinal surgery that could have saved his career, and instead they persuaded him to choose their so-called less invasive treatments by promising fast recovery and little downtime. What they failed to tell him was that these procedures would bring only short-term relief lasting just weeks, while making his already damaged back even worse and causing permanent harm. The financial motives behind this alleged negligence are just as troubling, as the lawsuit claimed that founder James St. Louis had a large ownership stake in the facility that was never revealed to Hogan, raising the possibility that money, not medicine, was behind the choices made about his treatment. Hogan's insurance company was billed hundreds of thousands of dollars for these procedures, yet the wrestling legend only experienced short bursts of relief that lasted no more than 2 or 3 weeks. Perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this medical betrayal was the toll it took on his career and personal life. As the lawsuit claimed, these unnecessary procedures caused massive financial losses, estimated at more than $50 million. Even more painful was the fact that they robbed him of what could have been a career-defining final match, because Hogan had been scheduled to face John Cena at WrestleMania in a dream showdown that fans had wanted for years. Instead of passing the torch to the next generation on wrestling's biggest stage, Hogan was left in unbearable pain, his career cut short by procedures that, according to the allegations, should never have been performed.
I would have loved to have had that last match But now it's completely out of the picture. You know, I'm just too beat up from the surgeries, and so all of a sudden I'm on the phone with Vince. I was like, oh my God, oh my back went out when I was talking to Vince on the phone. And I just had back surgery number 3 or 4 at that time, and I had to go right in immediately and get.
The emotional weight of this lost chance cannot be overstated, as wrestling's greatest champion was forced to cancel his possible retirement match, not because of natural aging or a real injury, but because of what he claimed were unnecessary medical procedures that had left him unable to perform. The man who had headlined 8 of the first 9 WrestleManias was denied his final moment in the spotlight by doctors who, according to the lawsuit, put their own financial interests ahead of their patients' health. Hogan eventually went through traditional fusion surgery in December 2010 and managed to return to limited work after 3 months, but by then, the damage was irreversible. The window for his dream retirement match had closed forever, and his body had been permanently weakened by the alleged malpractice he had endured. The case against the Laser Spine Institute was eventually settled out of court for what was reported to be a high 7-figure to low 8-figure sum, estimated at more than $10 million. But no amount of money could ever return Hogan's health or give him the career ending he truly deserved. And the tragic irony is that Hulk Hogan, the man who had survived everything professional wrestling had thrown at him, may have been undone not by the ring itself, but by the very medical system that was supposed to heal him. The doctors who should have been his lifeline became, according to explosive legal documents, the very architects of his downfall. Yet, this story runs deeper than medical malpractice, because in some ways, Hogan may have played a part in his own undoing. The famous leg drop that thrilled millions of fans became the very move that betrayed him, as the destruction of his legendary physique was not a sudden collapse, but a slow and systematic breakdown that built up over decades, sped up by questionable medical choices and worsened by the brutal demands of professional wrestling. To truly understand how the man once known as the immortal Hulk Hogan became a shadow of himself, we need to look closely at the devastating series of injuries that turned wrestling's greatest superhero into a patient trapped in a never-ending cycle of pain and surgeries. The root of Hogan's physical downfall can be traced to one move that seemed simple on the surface: his trademark leg drop, the finishing maneuver he used for more than 3 decades. While it looked to fans like a safe way to end a match, in reality every single leg drop delivered a crushing impact to Hogan's own body. In a 2019 interview with the Los Angeles Times, Hogan admitted, "All the back surgeries I've had are because of that leg drop. Dropping that leg for 35 years is what ruined me."
Is there anything in your career that you would go back and change?
I know the leg drop doesn't look like a tough move. So all those years dropping that leg in those rings, you know, with the board sticking up or landing on my tailbone, oh my God, what was that, a rock in the ring? Oh my God, was that a board sticking up? All those years dropping the leg, I would have changed that, and I would have never dropped the leg.
The mathematics of destruction are staggering when you consider the long-term toll of Hogan's signature move. As research suggests, he performed the leg drop more than 300 times a year during his peak wrestling years, which means that over his 35-year career, he endured the equivalent of thousands of high-impact collisions directly to his tailbone and lower back. Each time he dropped that leg, shockwaves tore through his spine, slowly wearing down vertebrae, herniating discs, and creating the spinal instability that would haunt him for the rest of his life.
I don't know if you saw the TNA run. There were several times I was out in the ring with a back brace on, neck collar, back surgery 8 or 9 or whatever it was at the time. But yeah, it was. I wasn't really good to go after that. I'd been cut on so much and so often that they'd compromised the structure of my spine, you know.
But the leg drop was only the beginning of Hogan's physical destruction, because the wrestling industry of the 1980s and 1990s was a completely different world compared to today's more safety-focused approach. Hogan himself described the brutal conditions he endured, recalling matches with Andre the Giant where the ring was so dangerous that Andre would warn him, "Don't go down," because even a simple fall could have left him paralyzed. He specifically remembered wrestling Andre at the Baltimore Civic Center, where they fought inside a 22-foot boxing ring that was as hard as concrete and full of bumps and holes. On top of this, the physical demands of Hogan's schedule during his prime were almost inhuman, as he revealed that he was flying 300 days a year and wrestling between 400 and 450 times annually.
We were talking earlier, when I was doing this full time, before this John Cena and The Rock and these guys came around, I was really flying 300 days a year.
300 days.
And I was wrestling 400 to 450 times a year.
To put this into perspective, Hogan was performing physically demanding matches more often than there were days in the year, sometimes wrestling multiple shows in different cities within a single day. He described wrestling twice on Wednesdays, with a Saturday morning show at the Philadelphia Spectrum at 1 hour, then flying to perform that same night at Madison Square Garden, followed by a Sunday afternoon show at the Boston Garden, and another match that evening at the LA Forum. This brutal schedule, combined with the lack of proper safety standards at the time, created the perfect storm for a catastrophic physical breakdown. Every match added another layer of damage to an already strained body. Every landing created microfractures and weakened bones, and every impact pushed him one step closer to the medical nightmare that would define his later years. The surgeries that followed sounded like a medical horror story. As Hogan himself revealed, he underwent 25 operations in his final decade, including 10 back surgeries on his spine, complete replacements of both knees and both hips, multiple shoulder surgeries that required arthroscopic procedures on each, operations on his eyes likely caused by orbital fractures from facial impacts, and abdominal surgeries, whose details remain unclear but were most likely linked to wrestling injuries. Perhaps the most shocking revelation about Hogan's medical struggles came from fellow wrestling legend Kurt Angle, who dropped a bombshell about Hogan's condition after his 11th back surgery. In January 2023, Angle revealed on his podcast that Hogan had undergone yet another back operation, where the nerves in his lower body were cut, leaving him unable to feel his legs and forcing him to use a cane to get around. This claim sent shockwaves through the wrestling world, as it suggested Hogan had endured a procedure so extreme that it left him without feeling below the waist. While Hogan's representatives quickly denied that he was paralyzed, insisting that he was doing well, not paralyzed and able to walk without a cane, the damage to his image and the growing concern about his condition had already taken hold. The man who had once been celebrated as the strongest wrestler in the world was now being spoken of in terms of nerve damage and mobility aids, a heartbreaking transformation. For wrestling's ultimate superhero, Hogan had lost nearly 3 inches in height, shrinking from his peak of 6'7" down to about 6'4", as a result of spinal compression and the toll of repeated surgeries. In a 2005 interview, Hogan openly confirmed this heartbreaking change, saying, "I used to be 6'7", but after knee, neck, and back surgeries, I'm now about 6.4. The symbolic weight of this physical decline cannot be overstated, as a larger-than-life superhero was literally shrinking before the eyes of his fans. Yet, the pattern of medical negligence did not end with the Laser Spine Institute scandal, because as Hogan's health continued to spiral, he became trapped in what he described as a vicious cycle of prescription drug dependence. The pain from his failed surgeries was so severe that doctors began giving him stronger and stronger painkillers, including fentanyl, the deadly drug that had nearly taken his life years before his actual passing.
And the thing that stopped me, this thing that shut me down completely, where I said enough's enough, is when they hit me with the fentanyl stuff. They almost killed me with that stuff. So that's when I said, I'm done. You know, and I didn't even know they gave it to me, but morphine and Dilaudid and none of that stuff worked on my back. I'd had so many surgeries.
The fentanyl prescription stands as another shocking example of medical malpractice that nearly claimed Hogan's life long before his actual death. By his own account, doctors put him on fentanyl after he had built up a tolerance to morphine from countless surgeries, but what they gave him was essentially a death sentence in pill form. Even the pharmacist reportedly told him that he had never seen anyone on so much fentanyl and still alive, highlighting just how dangerously close Hogan came to losing his life at the hands of the very system meant to save him.
And the pharmacist says, I've never seen anybody on so much fentanyl and still be alive. And so that was the prescription they were giving me because my back was so bad. They cut on me so much and compromised the structural integrity of my back by cutting so much bone away that I was just a mess, you know. And so
this pharmaceutical nightmare reached its terrifying peak with the fentanyl prescription that nearly ended Hogan's life. As the dosage was so extreme, it included 150 milligram patches placed on his legs, along with 280 fentanyl pills that had to be tucked under his gums in the morning and again at night. The sheer amount of fentanyl running through Hogan's system was so dangerously high that even medical professionals were stunned he managed to survive.
In 2 weeks, I laid it all out, and I told my ex-wife at the time, I'm going upstairs, bring me about 15 gallons of water, I don't want to see anybody. And the first thing I did was cut the patches in half and put them on my legs like an idiot. And I called my pain doctor and told him what I did. He goes, take that shit for your legs, that's how people overdose.
The effects of this overprescription were horrific, as Hogan described violent reactions where his body twisted uncontrollably in his sleep with his head and shoulders facing in opposite directions, sometimes requiring EMTs to intervene. During withdrawal, he suffered terrifying hallucinations, including visions of his wife's teeth falling out and speaking to him, and he lost 35 pounds during the brutal detox process. The final medical procedures before Hogan's death painted an equally troubling picture, as in May 2025, he underwent what was described as a small fusion surgery on his neck. But reports quickly surfaced of serious complications, including damage to his trachea that left him unable to speak. Former friend and radio host Bubba the Love Sponge claimed, Hogan's not doing well. He can't speak, his trachea was damaged, and he's having serious problems. It doesn't look good. Despite these alarming reports, Hogan's wife, Sky Daly, continued to deny the severity of his condition, telling the public in July 2025, No, he's definitely not in a coma. His heart is strong, and there was never any lack of oxygen or brain damage. Just 2 days before his death, Hogan's close friend Jimmy Hart insisted that Hogan was doing phenomenal, but the reality turned out to be far different from these public reassurances. When Hogan passed away on July 24th, 2025, only weeks after such denials, it raised questions about whether his condition had deteriorated suddenly, or if the true extent of his medical struggles had been kept hidden from the public. The timing of his death cast serious doubt on the quality of medical care he was receiving, and whether proper protocols had been followed in his final treatment. And when his daughter finally spoke, the mystery began to unravel in a way more shocking than anyone could have imagined. In the aftermath of Hulk Hogan's passing, while the wrestling world mourned and mainstream media celebrated his legacy, a very different story started to emerge from those who knew him best, his family. Even as tributes poured in from wrestlers, celebrities, and politicians, Hogan's daughter Brooke and other family members remained notably absent from much of the public mourning, a silence that spoke volumes about the complicated relationships and hidden truths that surrounded the wrestling legend's final years, the absence of family voices in the immediate aftermath of Hogan's death was no coincidence, but rather the result of years of estrangement and dysfunction that had played out in public. In March 2025, only months before her father's passing, Brooke Hogan revealed that she was distancing herself from her family, including Hulk, citing years of abuse and ongoing family turmoil. In a candid Instagram post, Brooke claimed she had endured extreme verbal and mental abuse since childhood, and explained that her decision to cut ties also involved protecting her new family, including her twins. This estrangement takes on even greater weight when viewed alongside Hogan's medical struggles and the circumstances surrounding his death, as sources close to the family suggested that Brooke's distance from her father wasn't only about personal family issues, but also about her growing belief that serious medical malpractice was being ignored or even covered up by those around Hogan. The first signs of family concern about Hogan's medical care surfaced during the infamous Laser Spine Institute lawsuit. While the case was ultimately settled out of court for a reported $10 million, sources say family members had wanted a far more aggressive legal fight, one that could have exposed the full scope of the alleged malpractice. Brooke, in particular, was vocal about her belief that her father was being exploited by doctors who saw him less as a patient in need of care and more as a payday. This troubling pattern of exploitation seemed to continue well into Hogan's final years. Loved ones reportedly worried about his grueling workload and the toll it was taking on his fragile health. Jimmy Van der Linden, founder of the wrestling outlet Fightful, revealed that people close to Hogan had confided they were unhappy with his management team, accusing them of running him into the ground promoting his beer brand in the last year of his life. Taken together, these accounts suggest that even as Hogan's body was breaking down, those around him kept pushing, and his family feared it was killing him. Hogan's final year schedule looks deeply troubling when compared to his medical condition, because despite having undergone 25 surgeries in the past decade and struggling with multiple serious health problems, he was still actively promoting Real American Beer and launching Real American Freestyle Wrestling, RAF, where he served as commissioner, which included media appearances, event planning, and fan interactions, and reports suggest he was often traveling even though his health no longer allowed it, which is why his family's concerns about exploitation were not just about his work schedule, but also about how doctors seemed to be taking advantage of his desperation to find relief from chronic pain, with the fentanyl prescription that nearly killed him standing as the clearest example, since doctors prescribed him this extremely dangerous drug not out of medical necessity, but because he was a high-profile patient with excellent insurance, and the cost of this fentanyl alone was around $2,000 every 2 days, not covered by insurance, forcing him to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars out of pocket every year. Family members reportedly questioned whether such costly treatments were recommended for Hogan based on genuine medical need or financial motives, and the issue becomes even more complicated when factoring in his admitted steroid use during his wrestling career. Since in 1994, Hogan testified that he had been on steroids for about 13 to 14 years, and medical research clearly shows that long-term anabolic steroid use is linked to serious cardiovascular issues, including weakened heart function and higher chances of heart attacks, which makes his death from cardiac arrest at age 71 raise serious doubts about whether his doctors fully accounted for his steroid history when planning treatments and surgeries, as well as when prescribing strong painkillers. And family members reportedly feel that this history should have been central in evaluating his risks, especially with major surgeries and powerful drugs like fentanyl, because the combination of years of steroid use, repeated major operations, and heavy prescription medications created a dangerous storm of heart risk that might not have been properly managed. And now sources say Brooke and other relatives are consulting legal experts to go through Hogan's medical records to see if more malpractice claims can be filed over his final treatments. The precedent set by the successful Laser Spine Institute lawsuit gives Hogan's family a clear path for possible legal action, especially if evidence shows that unnecessary treatments were carried out or that doctors failed to follow proper medical standards. And as this investigation moves forward, the questions surrounding his death grow even more troubling, such as whether wrestling's biggest star was truly brought down by the toll of his career or by a medical system that failed him at his weakest. Whether doctors put profit above patient care by performing needless surgeries and prescribing dangerous drugs to a desperate man. And most importantly, whether his death could have been avoided if he had received proper ethical medical care that focused on healing instead of money. And the answers to these questions may ultimately come from the very family members who had distanced themselves from Hogan in his later years, with Brooke and other relatives insisting they saw firsthand what they believe was the systematic destruction of wrestling's greatest icon at the hands of the very medical establishment meant to protect him. And as they continue to speak out, the truth about what really ended the life of Hulk Hogan may finally be revealed. So if you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes on your screen to watch more content like this.